Right, so here we go. So how do the writers present their perspectives? That's it. It is that dull, that unimpressive. Now, this is the writers plural because you are going to get a comparison. Okay? So this part here, that's going to be your compare and contrast. For the purposes of now, we're just going to deal with her. Okay? So for today, we're just going to deal with how does she present her perspective. Yeah? But I reckon if she were to come up, then this would... But it would be her perspectives on her experiences or on the events. But it's going to be about a particular person's point of view about your external concept. So, what are your three assessment objectives? Your three assessment objectives that you need to make sure that somewhere along the line we cover?
Context?
Which is?
I think it's L1.
No, wait, A3.
Yep.
Context.
Okay, so that's context, and what does that mean?
It's just the understanding of the text. So that
We kind of have to know a bit about when it was written, because otherwise you can't say how it would have affected the people who actually read it at the time.
Purpose, why is she writing it?
fact.
Yeah? Form,
Fact.
Yeah. What has she written? Well, it's a letter. Okay, and within that, what is it going to give us? What information is it going to give us, or clues or hints? If you know she's writing a letter, what predictions can we make? What expectations are we going to have?
Sorry, what did PF stand for?
Purpose, form, and then what are the other two?
Audience.
Yep, and then context. So which is a mini potted history, so dealing with time. Okay, but with this then, okay, what will they provide for us?
Understanding?
Of what? So let's deal with the purpose first. What?
Why it was written.
Okay. So why has she written it? So look at your context box.
They were for her sister.
Mm-hmm.
And giving, because she was mainly stuck at home
Mm-hmm.
in her house, giving her a broad
As the angel of the home.
Yep, good.
understanding.
So what is she giving Henrietta?
Her experiences
Yeah.
of her travels.
I think, well, Henrietta, you know that she would never have travelled anywhere
Mhm.
outside where she lived.
Good.
So she's just, I don't know, opening her mind that there's other places in
There
the
we go.
world.
And it's opening her mind. And that's really what this woman is doing. She's not bound by husbands at this point. She's not brilliantly well, but she's got pluck, she's got courage. She's a determined woman. She's not the kind of person you would want to cross, really. However, she has got a sister at home who is not of the same metal. She's not the same kind of person. She's stuck at home, probably the angel of the home. We don't really know a huge amount about Henrietta. However, this is an insight. This is an exciting, tantalising, sensational, slightly naughty treat for Henrietta to broaden and to brighten her normal day, which, to be perfectly honest, is going to be mainly sewing, singing at the pianoforte, and reading, possibly painting in the garden. Okay, so by comparison, she's certainly not romping around the Wild West on a horse. Okay, so we've then got this idea of it's tantalising. Which I can't spell.
So was Lucy only able to do this because of her money?
The likelihood, yes. If you didn't have money, you wouldn't have been able to afford this. So it is a privilege to do it. And frequently the women who came from privilege were more likely to be tolerated for breaking the rules. They could get away with it. It was a thing of the privilege that you had the opportunity to break the rule. If you were less privileged, you didn't, and you would have been disgraced.
Okay.
So there is a huge amount of hypocrisy and kind of an ins and outs in terms of the standard and the expectation behind it. That's purpose, right? Form then. What is it?
A letter.
Good. And what does that lead us to expect?
Some form of direct address, probably.
Yeah, so it's clearly written for a very specific individual. Yeah, that comes into the audience as well. So form and audience can work together, even though the audience here has a dual purpose. We'll come to in a minute. So it's, again, to Henrietta. But if you're writing a letter, what expectations are we going to have that are reasonable for the things that she's going to say in it?
Probably just some mundane stuff as well.
Yeah? What else? Is she though? Actually, is she? Is she going to have really boring stuff? She's writing, she's romping around the Wild West to her sister Henrietta. Is she going to talk about really boring stuff?
No.
No, because it's not really interesting. You're not going to write home going, yeah, got up today, and there wasn't any hot water, so that was a bit of a pain. Never mind. That's not interesting. You don't write home about that. You don't put that on a postcard. So what is she going to be using? What is she going to be saying?
Probably exaggerating some of the stuff as well.
Potentially. Okay, so we might have some potential hyperbole, or at least the loosening of the facts, the loosening of some of the actual detail. Is her dream, second paragraph, I dreamt of bears so vividly that I woke with a furry death hug at my throat. Really? Did she really wake up with a furry death hug at her throat? Probably not. She probably realised that she was snoring and her throat hurt. But you know what? She's not going to tell her sister that. She's going to play on the story. She's going to be more creative and more expansive in her descriptions than it was just like, yeah, I had a dream of bears. It was really vivid, really, really clear. Throat was scratchy. No, because that's really boring. So she's going to make this an experience for her sister. Okay, so we can expect there to be that level of that potential hyperbole, and then just stretching out some of the truth and kind of broadening things a bit.
Was the guy just trying to scare her when he told her that somebody had been running through with a chopped up body in a bag?
Why not? We don't know.
Okay.
But really, in the whole scheme of things, and she's like, yeah, rock on, love it. Really? There were odd people, but there are odd people in all sorts of walks of life. Whether that's exactly what was going on, I don't know. But I probably think she's playing with the excitement. She's playing with the sensation of where she is. More than likely. I wouldn't have said that that's the most plausible thing. Especially with the way that she deals with it. She's like, oh, excellent. If that were really true, he wouldn't have left her alone going, bye now. You know, he would have taken her with her, everything would be shut down.
Do you think her sister actually wanted to go? Because in some way it feels like she's like making it like persuading her to like get out.
Yeah, and I think that she is trying to reveal that actually the world isn't that much of a scary place. You can go out. You don't have to have a man chaperone you all over the place. Women in the 19th century were very, very sheltered. They weren't allowed to go places on their own unless they had a chaperone. So unless they had a maid with them, unless they had a girlfriend with them, a sister, an aunt, usually unmarried one, going to balls and parties, you always had to have a chaperone. If you were unmarried, you had to be either your mother, your aunt. You would never go anywhere on your own, ever. Not that women were suddenly more vulnerable than at any other time in life, but the impression was that you were placing yourself in a position.
Lovely.
In some cases, it was a wonderful time to be alive, but other cases, very far from it. Right, so I mentioned here, if we go back to this one, I mentioned here that the idea of the audience, that there is a dual purpose. Now, looking at the context, she's writing to her sister. Bird, as we know, which ties into this bit here, is a prolific writer. She's a writer. She knows the way words work. She knows the impression that's going to happen. So the likelihood is that you're going to have the potential hyperbole. It's probably going to be more likely that she's going to be hyperbolic, because she's a writer, okay? So if she's an intrepid explorer and she's a writer, she knows about words. So she knows the impact that she's going to have. She knows what's going on. Beyond this as well, this was published as a book. So it says that the letters were subsequently published as a book, A Lady's Life in the Rocky Mountains in 1879. When did she die?
Wasn't it before that, like 73?
So she wrote this letter in 1879.
When 80, I think it's like a 3. 83? I'll Google it.
If we can find out when A Lady's Life in Rocky Mountains was published, then we can see whether she was still alive at the time.
She died in, oh my gosh, she died in 1904.
Oh.
So she would have been alive. I think it's fairly easy, but she would have been alive when that was published. But if she knows that she's got a multiple audience, and the possibility that these are going to be published elsewhere, you could then expect that she isn't going to have your niff, naff, and trivia in there.
It was published in 1879, so the same year as the letter.
Okay, so
Oh, so was this like near the end of her letters?
so this is the second letter that she wrote, and if it's published in a similar year, then actually Henrietta or Bird herself have then opened it. But if we know that she's a writer, we know this isn't necessarily just going to be to Henrietta. We can therefore expect that she is not going to have your personal detail behind it, because we don't get anything here about whether she had.
So it's very like descriptive of like what she saw rather than what she
Yes, yeah, descriptive of what she saw, rather than personal issues. We don't talk. She doesn't talk about the size of her bedroom. She doesn't talk about whether she had her petticoats on. She doesn't talk about how lonely she is. She doesn't talk about that intimate knowledge and communication she would have with her sister. It is almost as if she's writing to Henrietta as, I'm writing to you, but I kind of also know we're going to publish later.
Oh, so she already like knew.
I think that's an assumption we can make, because she's
Did
already
she
a writer.
self-publish it, or did she like ask for it to be
Don't know.
published?
She's well published through journals, magazines, and
But
travel
so
books.
she already had been published before she
Mm.
left.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So from here, we've got Henrietta as the principal audience, so your principal reader. However, I also think you have a dual readership. Because of the publication. And the justification behind that is a distinct lack of intimate and private detail. Which text do we know already that does have intimate private detail? Niff, naff, and trivia.
Peeps.
Yeah.
Peeps. Yeah, because he talks about putting his dressing gown on. He talks about going to Jane's window. He talks about later on going out to dinner and how pleasant that was, and how nice lady or Mrs. So-and-so is as opposed to her ineffectual, insipid husband. That's what you're going to get in a personal letter. He's writing that because he's writing for himself. She's not writing these letters for Henrietta alone. She's writing it for a wider audience.
It's quite selfish, in a way.
She's a writer.
I don't think it's selfish. I think that she mentally knows what she wants out of life completely.
She's crafted this. It's a crafted letter. And within that, she's been expansive with how she's dealt with it.
No,
Yeah.
I'm saying it's quite sad for her sister, though, because she's not really finding out anything about how her sister's actually doing.
No. But no. I don't know what their relationship was, but
I don't think they'd be very close. They're very different
No.
people.
be interesting. But again, think really carefully as to whether that's something that you need to reflect upon too much in a response. So, context, okay? Dates and times, really.
We can't see it, sorry.
There we are. Okay, so you're dealing with dates and times. Okay, however, this is to give you an insight into ideas, not a potted history. Okay, you're dealing with 19th century women, values and attitudes. Okay. So that's AO3 in a nutshell. But what this has done is here already, lack of intimate private detail. Which assessment objective does that tie into?
What A1's knowledge?
Mhm.
Meaning.
Yeah.
It's meaning.
Yeah, so if AO1, back at the top, if AO1 is knowledge, so it's your knowledge of the text, AO2 is the meaning that's created, which is your interpretation. Remember that in order to access AO2, you then have to be able to get your head round what you know of the text, the choices the writer is making, and how they've been influenced. Oops, where's it gone? There we go. Okay. And this little diagram here, this model, is everything you need to know about the course. So AO2 is the meaning that's been made, your interpretation. You as a reader, what do you get from it? What does it mean to you? What does a writer wanting you to think? What choices has the writer made in order to get you to think that? And what influence did the writer have in order to make those choices to do that? Yeah? So that sort of diagram there is important. With the Unit 1 with the anthology, this is only 3%, these two are 4%. Your comparative is 5%, but that's making sure that you're able to understand the fact that two texts are reflections of each other. That is yet to come. We need to get the rest of us under our belt. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay.